Welcome to period 3, contextualization. And if you remember, contextualization is our lesson where we establish our overview of what period 3 looks like. And this is going to hit on some of the major themes and major events that will take place in this period. So let's get started. We're going to look at our objective, which says that you shall be able to explain the context in which America gained independence, 1, and 2, developed a sense of national identity. So those are the two themes that will be woven in and out of period 3. We're going to start, first of all, with what's called the French and Indian War. And it begins with a rivalry between the world's two biggest superpowers at this time, Britain and France. And they're duking it out with each other in Europe and around the world to become the world's greatest nation and control more trade and make more money and be militarily superior. That conflict around the world is called the 7 Years' War. In our little corner of the planet, in North America, we call it the French and Indian War. Same conflict, it's just specifying when it takes place in North America between the French colonial settlers and the English colonial settlers. And it's called the French and Indian War because Native nations are important factors in this war. Native people are going to align in some cases with the French, in other cases with the English. They're really hedging their bets to see if this side wins, how will it benefit me? If this side wins, how will it benefit me? In the end, France ultimately lost the war and Britain won. So after the French and Indian War, we see that British control of the colonies tightens up. Britain is broke, to be honest, from fighting the 7 Years' War. And so they look to the colonies as a source of new income. And new income means new taxes. And so Britain's going to impose taxes on the colonies, which are not very welcome. In addition, they're going to pass a series of other policies which assert Britain's right to directly rule the colonies and really chafe the colonists under the collar because they don't like this direct intervention by Britain. Eventually, that colonial anger erupts in the war for independence, and the scrappy American colonists decide to take on the world's biggest superpower to fight for their own country. They get a strong ally with France, who still sore with Britain about their defeat in the 7 Years' War, and together the Americans and their French allies win independence for the new United States. We're going to distinguish the war from independence, which is the actual fighting of the revolution, from the idea of the American Revolution itself, which is a change in thinking that's going to take place in the colonies. And it's going to be peppered with some of these ideas from the Enlightenment about self-government that we saw in period 2. The ultimate manifestation of this American Revolution, this revolution in thinking and ideas, will be the Declaration of Independence, which will be drafted by the founders of the country, formally severing their social contract with Britain. So after the Declaration of Independence, America has to figure out, well, how do we govern ourselves? And we try the Articles of Confederation as a loose-knit alliance of independent states that has some sort of national government, but not one that's real strong. And as you can imagine, it flopped pretty hard. So within a relatively short amount of time, we need to scrap that government and create a new one. And this new government is called the Constitution of the United States. And delegates assembled in Philadelphia, and they wrote up a new framework for a stronger national government that shares power with sovereign independent state governments. It's kind of a compromise between the Articles of Confederation and British rule. That's really what the Constitution is. In addition to that, there were concerns among some opponents of the Constitution that it did not do enough to protect individual liberties. And so the Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution as the first 10th Amendment to protect those individual liberties and individual rights of people from arbitrary government interference. So, with the creation of a new government, we need new leaders. And at this time, we're going to see the Washington and Adams administrations come in. These are the first two presidents of the United States, and really, they have a blank tablet that they need to write and figure out, well, what does the Constitution mean? How does this work? On a daily practical matter, how do these words have to play out? So Washington and Adams are going to establish a lot of precedents in the United States, our traditions, our ways of doing things based on how they interpret the Constitution. As with anything in American politics, not everybody's going to agree with them. People like Thomas Jefferson oppose the ideas that these early governments have, which leads to the formation of the first political parties in the United States. And these parties are quickly going to become integral to American politics and American society, as we know today. Alongside of these political changes, there's some cultural changes that emerge as the different regions of the colonies, while united, still continue to develop their own different personas. The northern colonies are more commercial and trade-based in commerce, while the southern colonies are deeply rooted in agriculture and that slave society that supports that. So as much as we're unified, we're not quite the same. So there's a number of problems that the new nation has to address. One is that long-standing theme we've seen since period one, conflict with Native Americans as people begin to move westward. The Proclamation line's gone, and white culture and Native culture clash over land and changes to Native culture, which will be problematic for the Americas. We also see the emergence of a schism or a split between Western Americans who live on the frontier in the Ohio River Valley on the edge of civilization, and Eastern Americans who live on the coast along the older established cities on the older plantations. So that rivalry will develop as they become geographically further apart. And then finally, in the northern colonies, especially in New England, we see the first beginnings of an anti-slavery movement to abolish slavery in the United States and strong Southern resistance against anti-slavery as their entire economy is contingent upon the unfree labor of enslaved Africans. The United States as a country also is going to engage in some early foreign policy issues. One of our biggest problems continues to be the British. They're interfering with American trade, but closer to home, the British government still has soldiers on American soil up by the Great Lakes, and those soldiers are arming the natives to fight the white settlers who are coming through. So it's Britain's way of kind of a gotcha to the new United States as they're trying to make our westward settlement more complicated through their alliances with Native people. We also have a problem with Spain, which got the Louisiana Territory in period two. That included the Mississippi River. And the Mississippi is the lifeblood of the western settlers. They need to be able to move their goods down the Mississippi to New Orleans, and so they can trade them. So we're going to have to figure out, how do we navigate the Mississippi in partnership with Spain? Finally, as wars continue to be fought between Britain and France in Europe, George Washington declares the Neutrality Proclamation, which creates a policy we'll call isolationism. The U.S. will remain neutral and stay out of foreign affairs because we don't want to be dragged into European wars as a brand new baby nation. So those are the themes that we're going to look at, keeping again in mind how we are going to establish a context of America gaining independence, the things that led up to both the War for Independence and the American Revolution, and then how following that, the ideas of the American Revolution, the thinking part, find their way into our new national identity as a country. And that's all we have for today for Lesson 3.1. Have a good one, everybody.